Hey, Kelsie.
Hey, Brooke.
Want to tell everyone what's happening in today's episode?
Today, we're going to talking about controversial issues in the classroom.
Snap.
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, let's go.
Hello, and welcome to Remedial Herstory, the other 50%, the podcast that explores what happened to the women in history class. Now, here's your host, Kelsie Brooke Eckert, and her partner in crime, Brooke Neva Sullivan.
Okay, Brooke. Controversial issues.
Kelsie has a very aggressive look on her face.
All right. Here's the thing. Talking about women is controversial for some people. I know. So there's a million controversial issues out there that we could talk about. Obviously,
Periods,
where women...
tampons.
Yeah.
Got it.
But tampon, poverty and that sort of stuff. Like, should governments be paying for tampons? That's money. Controversy, drama, like abortion. We can just say the word controversy, like women's rights was incredibly controversial.
Controversy.
Yeah. So many things. And so, the tricky thing for teachers is like navigating those conversations in a way that both inform students about those different things, letting the students sort of throw out ideas and maybe make mistakes, like say something that it hurts or rubs people the wrong way or whatever, and like recovering from that. And then the question that scholars and the media and everybody are wondering is like, do you guide them towards
a point,
conclusions?
Yeah.
Or do you just let it run wild? And is it possible for people to sit in a conversation and walk away with really different opinions about it and not coming, is it okay to not come to consensus on what should be done?
But I also think, isn't that your role as an educator too, to also show how to debate as an adult without getting heated or flexing or walking away frustrated from a conversation? You've talked about this, your role as a history educator is to build good citizens and civic, minded individuals and people that are, civically engaged. The political climate right now that controversy is in a lot of these topics do you also teach your students how to have thoughtful debates where you can build respect for both angles and learn and still be engaging and still, talking with your counterpoint and feeling okay about it? That's a piece of this puzzle is if you can't bring up a controversial topic in your classroom, you can't have those opportunities for a really dynamic debate that allow people to see opposing sides and really understand that, we can walk away from this and still have a cordial conversation and still be citizens and good citizens, even though we sit on opposite ends of this table.
Yeah. I read an article recently that kind of made me wonder things, because I don't think anybody who listens to this podcast is that woman's not a feminist. I definitely am. You definitely are. And I also think
me. You don't know me.
I know you. Okay. I also feel like everyone should be feminists because and I think this is where that controversy comes in. Because if you I think that feminism is believing that men and women are equal and that there shouldn't be limitations put on you because of your gender and gender expression and put on you by society, whatever. So, and I think that anybody who doesn't believe in that needs to be open and say, I approve oppression and I am sexist. I feel like that's the alternative. But that's also very black and white thinking. And so I don't know. I don't really understand where the gray area is on putting yourself in a, do you support women or do you not? And I feel like there's a lot of people who are well, I do, because I love my sister and I love my mom and I love my mom.
Yeah, but they wouldn't qualify themselves as feminists.
Right. Yeah.
They feel like that's a radical perspective. They're you've gone too far.
Yeah.
How dare you want women to be equal?
So I'm a feminist. You're a feminist.
Yeah.
I want more people to be feminists. And interestingly, studies show that people who are feminists or who identify as feminists are infinitely more likely to teach women's history in their classroom. I know, shocking.
I'm so surprised.
So here's the weird thing. I read this article. It's 2015. It's by Marty Schmeichel. And it was published
Great name.
I know, right? Theory and Research in Social Education, which I get there. They are part of the University Faculty Assembly of the National Council for the Social Studies, and it's published by Rutledge and Taylor. Point of this is a super highly credible article.
Nailed it. We got it.
Got it. The title of this article is Skirting Around Critical Feminist Rationales for Teaching Women in Social Studies. And what she did was she looked at published lesson plans. I'm assuming not ours. Okay. And
well, in 2015, probably not.
Right. And no, because we didn't exist.
There you go.
Boom. So she looked at 16 different lesson plans that had been published about women's history. And she had a whole complicated methodology for tracking, coding the things that were built into these lesson plans. One of the things that she looked at was the rationales that were provided for why you should teach this lesson. Basically, there were half of the lessons gave technical responses, which is exactly what you just did.
Okay.
You gave a technical response. You said, well, we need to be teaching students these skills, right? About how to talk about things rationally. We need to do blah, 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 blah. And like the historian in me is like, we want them to be able to read differing sources and
hold opposing opinions.
Hold opposing positions and things like that. Yeah. So those are skills. And half of them said, we're teaching this lesson because we want students to have these skills. And they don't mention anything about the fact that this entire lesson is about women and using primary source material by women and about women and all these issues. And this other group said, it was kind of like a middle minority, said, we're doing these lessons because we want to women have been left out. And so we want to add them in, ta-da. And then there were other people who two people gave no rationale for why this lesson plan should be taught. Oh. And then the last one gave an explicitly feminist response for why you should be teaching this, to promote gender equality.
Okay.
And I realized that a lot of my methodology is in the camp of technical. Okay. I want students to walk away with these technical
versus
skills.
Like the tactile things of the topics.
Yeah.
Okay.
And her concern that is really valid, that I'm trying to wrap my mind around, and it's probably irresponsible to do a podcast on this, but I'm still trying to think about this. I think our audience would benefit from thinking about this, is I feel like I'm doing exactly what she's talking about, skirting around critical feminist theory and just throwing these women's history topics into my classes
versus saying why it's important. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Let them talk about abortion, and I'm not going to tell them what I think about it. I'm not going to engage in it. Well,
you don't do that anyways. You throw topics out, but you're saying you're not going to tell them why it's important to learn or approach that topic? Is that what you mean?
I will say something to the effect of, abortion is a hot button issue, so we should be talking about it. Oh. But I won't say we should be talking about it
because
in order
millions
to promote,
of women die.
Yeah, because maternal mortality is currently skyrocketing.
Because we're number one in the world for maternal mortality.
Well, developed world, but yeah,
okay.
So I don't add those sort of kind of feminist layers to why this is really important for us to understand.
Yeah.
And maybe I should, because, but my worry is two things. One, I'm worried that if my feminist perspective on something is part of it.
Yeah.
If I was a conservative student raised in a traditional family, maybe even an evangelical family, in that conversation about abortion, am I going to feel comfortable enough to speak up and share that perspective? Because I also, kind of contrastingly, I do believe that we get to the most right ideas by really talking it through. And so if that evangelical kid doesn't speak up and they don't say I don't know, I'm just really uncomfortable with it because it's as a life, and if they don't say that, then it can't be countered in the space. And it can't,
But you're going back to technical, though. So you're trying to say, technically, I should invite all voices to speak. How do I build an inclusive classroom that all voices are feeling welcome to debate and have a natural debate? What is the setting I'm putting them in versus the topic? And I think you're putting a hard topic, controversial topic out there, and you're like, okay, how do I make this an inclusive classroom that XYZ student feels like they can have a voiced opinion and build an inclusive moment that we can naturally debate without putting my own opinion into it?
Yeah. Like, how do I do that?
I think that's the question that so many teachers are asking themselves right now is like, God, this topic is huge and I want to bring it up because it's meaningful and students want to talk about it. I can remember having a class in high school and the teacher would put like trending topics on the board that's happening in today's politics or whatever's happening. And he always welcomed a discussion. He put it up there for a discussion, but he'd let you be the driver. If you didn't want to drive on that topic, you could just talk about the lesson for the day and get into the conversation for the day. But if you walked in the classroom and you saw like whatever it might be, Osama bin Laden was big when I was in high school and like figuring out all these things about Middle East. If you wanted to talk about that topic that day, he'd get into it with you. And that would be the discussion for the day. And be like, well, what do we know about this topic? What do we not know? Let's turn on our computer. Let's figure it out. Let's do some research. Bring it out. What did you find? It was all these like self-researched opportunities to go digging, but he never provided his own opinion on it. I mean, he's naturally a pretty liberal teacher, but we only really knew that because of like the decor in his room was really inclusive, and he also helped run the LGBTQIA club. So it was like, okay, thanks. Yeah. But he would let you bring in trending controversial topics. Yeah. And break it apart.
So I had an experience, and I think that many of us have had this experience on our own journey, but I had an experience with a student that I want to share with you. I do feel like a lot of people are not going to change their views on something like a lot of these topics, like equal pay, in a single lesson plan or even a unit, right? Like a lot of that takes kind of like longer, deeper experience and exposure. And the way it's presented in one setting might not translate, you might see it in different, and it changes the way you process that idea. And I do think a lot of teaching is seed planting.
Totally.
It's just like,
I don't even know if it's seed planting so much as like, here's the shovel, here's the seed. Yeah. You decide.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know that you're like digging the soil and planting the seed. Yeah. You're providing all the things to make the garden. They decide if they're going to show up. Yeah. And you're like, I've got water when you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had an experience with a student. She was in high school. I had her in 11th grade, U.S. history. The thing that's really hard is I feel like I'm so obviously a feminist that if I come in and I'm like, let's talk about feminism, it's too much. And but anyway, so I did what I do in class with her, and she was an adamant Trumper. When we were learning about different women's rights things, like she always argued against those like different topics from like a conservative, like fiscal conservative.
You got to give her credit for standing her ground in high school. It's not easy.
Ground. Flash forward 5 years, she's in college. I don't even know where she went and whatever. And is like, she wasn't even a history major. She was like something else. And she took the time to send me an email that was like pages long about how much I had changed her like perspectives, not because I did or said anything explicit, but just because I opened up doors to things she had never really
you dropped
heard
some
in her
bombs.
home.
You're like, interesting.
Yeah, defend that. Like,
defend that.
Yeah.
And where's your receipts?
But like if you had asked me when that person was a junior in high school, like
that you thought that they would come back,
like, is this person going to be liberal or conservative in their future? I would have been like, like she's
but
running.
I think that's true probably of a lot of students that people that listen to this podcast. They are hard set, whether that's liberal, conservative, whatever it might be right now. They're pretty set in, this is who I am. That's what high schoolers do. They want to be defined. They want to define themselves. They're in this moment where they are of self, and I wear this shoe, this makes me this. I listen to this music, that makes me that. Yep. They're constantly doing these definition moments. And it is when you leave that bubble of high school or in that moment and your brain starts to break a little bit and the people start to give you, these little cracks of light into different lanes. You're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
That person I was hard set on at 16, 17, that I was like, this is me.
Yeah.
And then you get into your 20s, it's like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
You have this crisis moment.
And I want to be clear, my goal is not to make people liberal or something like that. My goal, I'm sure there are liberal kids who are in the same class because I'm using the same pedagogy, right?
Yeah, and you're breaking their brain just as much.
Yeah. So let's hear what they've got to say. Defend that perspective.
Well, and I can remember being in a classroom where I had very clear opposing sides, and the teacher was very clearly like, debate, go for it, go nuts, have at it, bring all the things. And I always wanted them to stop the conversation and shut it down. They never did. And it's good for you that you didn't. You let this happen.
Yeah.
And you let the chips fall where they will. And you let the opinions come out as they did.
Yeah.
As long as no one was getting hurt or being offended.
In a later episode, we'll talk about strategies for navigating potentially offensive things that people could say. But I think that's a good thing. So what's kind of breaking my brain though is I have this very technical view of what the skills are that we should be teaching.
Sure.
And it's
but you can get there without bringing in controversial topics is what you're saying.
No, I think you can talk about controversial topics without having a preferred outcome. And I think what's tricky is she's saying the goal is gender equity. And these are the things that we should be guiding students through when you're teaching these lessons about women in history. And
subliminal messaging.
Kind of. But I'm wondering if she wants it to be more overt. A critical feminist theory is a much more overt thing. Let's look at the system. Yep. Let's break it down. And they've broken feminists into two camps. And I'm worried that I'm in the less radical one. So I don't know. But it's I like to be radical. I don't know.
Obviously.
But the, critical feminist, which is basically look at the system and how the system, has sort of perpetuated gender inequity, which I'm yeah, it has. I'm all about that. But I don't see critical feminist theory as the best approach to secondary curriculum. And at the same time, so the other group is called liberal feminism, which is just, let's talk about more women. And I'm oh, I think I kind of do that. I'm a liberal feminist where I'm let's get more women, let's get more people exposed to women and women's issues and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And maybe that's bad. I don't know. I'm having a life crisis here. That maybe I
do you need a hug?
Probably.
I feel like you get it. And it's you're never going to go in swinging a bat of feminism because it's not going to get the students where they need to go. And you're constantly the technical piece of it is going to lead you down that breadcrumb.
The counter movement has made feminism an F word.
Right.
And there's a great article from the 90s called The Other F Word in the Classroom. And people should definitely check that out. And I think that's a battle that you're fighting. And actually there's a really cool study in the last 5 years where they looked at social media posts and the amount of engagement feminist ideas got by men. So so how much are men engaging in these posts about feminism? And one of the interesting things that they found was overwhelmingly, if the post was talking about feminist issues, but framing it in a human rights frame, men were far more likely to engage on it. The more it was feminism,
and alienating
and women, and this is a women's issue, and men were less likely to engage in it.
Tracks. I mean, let me tell you maybe what they found in that result was, when you invite someone to sit down, they sit down.
Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah. I know. But it's so frustrating though, because on the one hand, I'm okay, well, there's the transcript of what we need to be doing. If you want to convert more people to feminism, frame it in these universal human rights things.
I'll give you the opposing side to that though. I'm not trying to make feminism more digestible to anyone.
Right. I know. But that's what you're doing.
It's real hard. It's not easy. Walk a mile in a woman's shoes just once.
Yeah, I know. It's if you frame it as human rights and all these things, then, you're taking out the part about systemic gender like privilege that men have, that even if they're like, I was poor, I was da-da-da-da, like it still benefits you. Like, and you have no idea, like they don't get that.
But I've had the privilege of talking to men, actually someone recently who I was blown away by, and I think I sent you the camp that he is a counselor at. Yeah. It's this social justice camp that students can go to. It's based in California, and he's a counselor. He's been a counselor for years. He was a camper there back in the day. And right now, they used to run it for a week long, and it would help students really understand social justice from the angle of the age that they're at and how they can use their voice in ways that would be proactive, but they broach really challenging topics. And he is a white cis male. And so he obviously is stepping into a lane where most people are like, you are the epitome of privilege. And he has to kind of be a sponge to that and not walk around with this guilt and this, sadness about his privilege, but also be a great listener and empathetic and build space and show others how to invite cis white males to the table and like, how do you do this in building these bridges? And just a fascinating person. And there's so many people like him that are out there doing this great work. But it was one of these things where I loved that he was like, I have to own my privilege and I have to state it before anyone will even open the door to tell me about their inequity. Yeah. Because if I just come in and I'm like, tell me your problems, you don't fucking know. Yeah. White man in America. Yeah. Like he doesn't get invited. But if he states his privilege, understands I know what my privilege is, I have done the work, I've read the things, I'm here to listen to your journey so I can listen more, pour in. Yeah. And I think that that's maybe too what I think about with the classroom is people understanding it's the same thing in the workforce. If people can't understand their privilege, they can't show up in a way that can be a good listener. Right. It's like that you can't understand your bias, then you can't really understand unconscious bias. Right. It's like all these things. It's the same for like bringing these hard topics for students. You're cracking the door open, you're letting the light in, the student's like sitting down there, but you still have to talk about the hard things. You can't just like, feminism is a thing. It happened in the 70s. It's over now. It's like, that's not reality. So you have to lean in. Yeah.
Well, let's end there, Brooke. That's amazing. Okay. Because I feel like I'm not answering questions. And I think you're right, though. Like, we do have to lean in a bit. And I think that what I'm learning from this study is I need to lean in more on maybe the outcomes a bit.
Yeah. Like, what do you want the results to be?
Yeah. And maybe it doesn't need to be me hard, but maybe like really getting to the heart of issues with students. And if you're going to take a non-feminist position on something, I want you to understand what you're really saying, you know, and it's fine, you know, like if you're going to take that position and let that be okay.
The story I'm hearing, the story I tell myself is that you don't want women to have an equal position. It's like, that's what they need to hear. Yeah. Otherwise they'll continue to do that.
Right. Right. And if you don't, like, okay, then just own that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. But it's tricky. So we're going to keep going on this theme to sort of continue to talk about how can teachers have these sort of conversations in classrooms. And obviously we're going to keep posing maybe more questions than answers. Yeah. But I think it's a really important piece of anybody teaching women's history because you can't teach any of the topics we're talking about on this podcast without touching some sort of women's issue.
Yeah. And we post on our Instagram too. You know, you'll see when this new episode is up, and we invite you to come to the comments of that and pose your thoughts and your questions that come from this discussion too, because obviously we're two people having this chat about this topic, but
you've got great experience.
Yeah. You're listening. You're interested. We want to hear from you too. Like what would your insights be?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kelsie.
Thanks, Brooke.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to Remedial Herstory, the other 50%. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts to bring more voices to the conversation. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.